Ladies, mental gen, railbikes and railcars, welcome to another episode of Rank 10 Yu-Gi-Oh's Legacy of the Worthless. If you aren't familiar yet, in this series we're looking at the most unplayable archetypes ever shut out by Konami's executive asshole, what exactly makes those archetypes so horrible, and what could have been improved in order for them to be less awful. The grading scale we use involves consistency, power, comeback ability, protection and versatility, and an archetype is considered terrible if it doesn't excel in any of these categories. With that said, let's begin this episode's topic. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is weird. On one hand, you have an archetype which consists of 43 cards, of which around 5 are even remotely usable, making you ask what exactly they were thinking when they kept making them. On the other hand, you have several small but nonetheless barely usable sets of cards that can easily be explained as an honest mistake by the developers. However, Legacy of the Worthless isn't exactly a place for showing mercy to mere cardboard, no matter how much understanding we can offer to it. And because 5 to 10 cards is not exactly enough to make a decently long and, profound video, welcome to the first ever Legacy of the Worthless triple feature, themed around 3 very small and very unplayable archetypes from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Dark Scorpions, the world's most incapable group of bandits ever since Jay and Silent Bob attempted to break into an animal shelter, Venoms, proud owners of the OG Apocryphal Towers which they can't even summon, and B.E.S, which are frankly just B.S. So let us start off with them dang scorpions, and the reason I'm talking like this is because Don Zalug, their first monster, was for some reason given a Christopher Walken voice in the 4Kids dub. Truly, America works in mysterious ways. Anyway, he's a level 4 Dark Warrior with 1400 attack and 1500 defense, and when he deals battle damage to the opponent, you can either discard a random card from their hand or send the top 2 cards from their deck to the graveyard. You may remember this guy from the age-old meta in which discarding and milling was actually harmful to the opponent instead of making them plus, so you could make the argument that this card isn't exactly bad, or at least it used to be good, but nowadays relying on a 1400 attack monster to make the opponent set up their graveyard is pretty much the exact opposite of applicable. You may also notice he doesn't have Dark Scorpion in his name, and that's because he hails from a time when archetypes weren't quite a thing yet, so he was retroactively put into a series of monsters later on because... storyline, I guess? Haha, take that, old terminal, the Scorpions did it first! Standing proud at a great 3 feet and 28 inches tall is Dark Scorpion Chick the Yellow. Chick the Yellow. He's a level 3 with 1000 attack and defense, and when he inflicts battle damage to the opponent, you can target one card on the field and return it to the hand, or look at the top card of their deck and return it to the top or the bottom of the deck. By now you can notice that this archetype is based on dealing battle damage by using monsters with unformidable attack, to say the least, and while Chick's effects aren't exactly bad for their time period, the first one is pretty underwhelming because it's really hard to find a situation in which bouncing would be useful after already engaging in combat, and the second one is pretty much only decent when the opponent is relying on a luck sack to win, which rarely happens against Dark Scorpions. Admittedly, the card did have an OTK in which if the opponent was open for a direct attack, you could perform the following play. Send Macure the Destructor and Chick the Yellow to the graveyard by any means, then use Call of the Haunted or any similar continuous revival traps to special summon Chick, then attack directly and use his effect to bounce back your trap, which will send Chick to the graveyard, and then use Macure's effect to activate the trap from your hand and repeat the process. But Macure is banned, so you can't do that. Ugh! Dark Scorpion, Cliff the guy that falls through trap does shoot, is a level 3 with 1200 attack and 1000 defense, and when he deals battle damage, you can either destroy one spell or trap card on the field or mill 2 cards from the opponent's deck. The first effect officially marks the third appearance of Stealthroid's Too Slow to Matter back row destruction ability on Legacy of the Worthless, but the second one was actually pretty damn good for the time, mostly because it's the exact same thing as Dong Zalong's second effect. Admittedly, the first effect could have been useful back in the day with the presence of level and attack focused floodgates such as Gravity Bind or Messenger of Peace, so you could say it's not all bad. In the end, I guess he's decent enough for the archetype. I mean, I personally can think of several Cliffs worse than him, like this one, or this one, or this one! Dark Scorpion, Mine the Torn, is so mean she literally made it a part of her name. She's a level 4 with 1000 attack and 1800 defense, and upon dealing battle damage you can either add a Dark Scorpion card from your deck or your graveyard to your hand. Not many searchers can brag about being able to fetch any card of their entire archetype from the deck as well as the graveyard, but while Mina excels in gathering the gang, she makes sure to take her sweet time doing it. 1000 attack isn't nearly enough to beat over anything relevant often enough to matter, and while 1800 defense can cause the opponent to run into the card if you happen to start off with it face down and maybe take damage to enable a search, the maneuver is a bit too slow and infrequent to pull off these days. However, the card does come from a way slower format, so this kind of searching wasn't something that could necessarily be called terrible back then, making Mine a staple in dedicated Dark Scorpion decks given the fact that their search options are quite literally limited. The big guy of Gang B Dark Scorpion Gorg the Strong. Gorg big but not very smart. Gorg mad his shoulder look like big meaty butt. Gorg is a level 5 with 1800 attack and 1500 defense, always a wonderful stat line on a tribute monster, and upon dealing battle damage he lets you either target an opponent's monster and spin it to the top of their deck, or send the top card of their deck to the graveyard. To sum it up quickly, it's a single tribute monster with stats that would be good at best on a level 4, his second effect is outclassed by 3 other monsters in the same archetype, and while his first effect can be pretty dangerous by itself, the fact that this guy needs to hit the field and deal battle damage to apply it renders it way more situational than it needs to be. It says a lot about an archetype when their monster with the largest stats is the weakest of the bunch.
You're a big guy. For you.
The final monster of the archetype is all of them, apparently. Seriously, what the fuck kind of design is this? It would be like making Chosen of Zephyr a level 4 monster or something. Anyway, Dark Scorpion Burglars, and that name is not rolling off well on my non-native English tongue, is a level 4 with 1000 attack and defense, and when it deals battle damage, your opponent sends one spell card from their deck to the graveyard. So, obviously this is a trash 0-off with little to no relation to the rest of the archetype, but let me tell you about a little card called Jackpot 7. When this card is sent to the graveyard by your opponent's card effect, you can banish it, and when you have 3 banished Jackpot 7s by this effect, you win the duel. So what you do is you give this thing to the opponent because you have no use for it, then find a way to run into it 3 times to take damage from it, and that way you can send 3 Jackpot 7s from your deck to the graveyard, and then the opponent smacks you in the head with a chair and they're DQ'd from the tournament, therefore you win the duel. Unlike the Chick and Makura combo, this one is perfectly legal because Konami is a bunch of silly people who let something as imbecilic as Jackpot 7 be made. Seriously, do these people just never look at a card and go, should we make this? It kinda smells like FTK bullshit. But considering the fact that they let an FTK deck win Worlds once, I don't think that's the case. Their only spell card is Mustering of the Dark Scorpions, and I'm just gonna leave this here because that's what the artwork is, let's be honest. If you control a face-up Don Zalug, you can special summon any number of Dark Scorpion monsters from your hand, but only 1 copy of each. This was so close to being good, but it's limited to their least searchable monster and you can only special summon singles with it. I mean, admittedly, this is already more swarming capability than freaking Amazon S, but the condition suffers from deck's piss poor consistency. Also, I kinda wanna analyze this artwork a bit further. I mean, look at it. Don Zalug seems to be the only one enjoying himself here, being the leader and all, but Gorg is having trouble hearing him, so he put his hands behind his ears. Cliff is trying to unjam his hand from somewhere, possibly a trap he fucked up removing. Mine literally can't even right now, and Chick stepped on a Lego. And their only trap, also their last card in general, is Dark Scorpion Combination. You can only activate it if you control Don Zalug, Cliff the Trap Remover, Chick the Yellow, Gorg the Strong, and Mine the Torn. During this turn, these monsters can attack the opponent directly, but all damage they deal becomes 400. Well, the concept is there, but the condition is so batshit insane for what the card actually does that it barely even matters in the end. There are so many problems with this card that it's kinda difficult to round them all up. First of all, even without the 400 damage restriction, all collective Dark Scorpions still don't have enough power for an OTK, so that might as well not be there. The condition of requiring the entire gang to be in the field means you're probably winning already, considering you managed to summon them all without any interruption, so the benefits of this card are kind of pointless in the end. Then, it's also a trap for some stupid reason, even though there's literally no reason to activate it on your opponent's turn whatsoever. It's just a massive clusterfuck and quite possibly one of the worst designed cards of all time. If it didn't have that balls to the wall insane activation cost, as in if it could be activated while you control Don Zalug or any Dark Scorpion monster, it would definitely be worth running because it would make their effects a lot easier to pull off, and stuff like Chick's first effect would be a genuine threat. I have no clue who thought this card was a good idea, and I don't wanna think about it. Well, I'm not gonna dwell too much on the rating and quality analysis because we got 2 more archetypes to shit on, but it's still a thing I gotta do, so... Consistency. Mine is a thing, but it doesn't work very well. They are Dark Warriors, arguably the best combination of type and attribute in the game, so they have some third-party searching support, but none of it really helps them get to their win condition consistently. Power. Their strongest monster has 1800 attack. Comeback ability. About as much as Allies of Justice. Protection. Where? And versatility... You know, if today's format was one of the ones from 5 to 10 years ago, I'd say that if Scorpions opened up well, they could pose a significant threat to the opponent due to being able to leave them without resources, but today everyone and their mother relies on the graveyard to work, so this isn't very relevant. To make them better, you wouldn't actually have to try very hard. There's a clear teaming in effects and a pretty obvious win condition here, so making cards that build around said win condition and help them achieve it faster is the way to go. I think the main issues they have are searching, swarming, and actually battling, so maybe either retrain all of the monsters or give the existing ones a field spell that helps them out in those aspects. Something like a permanent Dark Scorpion combination effect that doesn't have an insane activation cost would be lovely, and maybe they could get something like an archetypal version of Moon Mirror Shield. I personally wouldn't mind Scorpions being brought back to relevance because they have this strange amount of personality in their artwork that you rarely see in other archetypes. You can easily deduce that this is a bunch of incompetent, down-to-earth, funny, comic relief bandits, which is a refreshing concept over all the superheroes and monsters and warriors we usually get. Plus it's a battle-focused archetype, something I always appreciate, so it would be nice if they were actually revisited one day. And hell, get Christopher Walken to star in a commercial for them, eh? The next bunch of cards on our list for dissection is the Venom archetype, the closest we will ever get to experiencing Australia in Yu-Gi-Oh! Barring Master Foss Beatdown. They were used by the villain of the first part of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX's absurdly tonal shifted Season 3 in a grand total of one duel, where he used almost every single Venom card and then lost to fucking Magma Neos. Imagine losing to Neos being the last event of your life. That guy is still rolling in his grave. Anyway, Venom's focus on this here field spell named Venom Swamp. During each player's end phase, you place one Venom counter on each face-up monster except Venom monsters. Monsters lose 500 attack for each of these counters on them, and if they reach 0 attack with them, they're destroyed. The reason why I'm showing a field spell this early on is because the archetype's gimmick is precisely these Venom counters, so it would make sense to explain the gimmick before actually showing how it's applied. With that said, here's our first monster. Venom Snake. A punished mercenary with nothing to lose. His history erased in order to serve as a misguided pawn in the game of war. Robbed of true freedom, tied to a single man's descent into... Wait, hold up, that's the wrong script, sorry everyone. There we go. Venom Snake is a level 3 Earth Reptile with 1200 attack and 600 defense, and once per turn you can place one Venom counter on a monster the opponent controls. If you activate this effect, this card cannot attack this turn. Crappy stats, low effect that's overly restrictive, and is arguably outclassed by its level 4 variant, Venom Serpent. It's a level 4 somehow with 200 less attack because level obviously has no bearing on stats, and has the exact same effect but doesn't prevent itself from attacking. Neither of these are particularly good by themselves, but together along with Venom Swamp they could weaken an opponent's monster for around 1500 attack, which would be an admirable effort if Venoms weren't so insanely slow even for their own time period. To emphasize, Venoms came out around the time we had Trooper Monarchs as meta, with Gladiator Bees just around the corner, so we're talking about the time when stats were becoming less and less important in favor of control effects. Now, if you thought Snake and Serpent had boring, samey effects, Konami decided to spice it up a little bit with Venom Boa, a level 5 with an ever so broken 1600 attack and 1200 defense, and once per turn. Are you ready for this? You better hold on to your shit, cause it's about to get blown. You can place 2 Venom counters on a monster the opponent controls, and this card cannot attack that turn. I presume Konami's idea was that you'll be having that field spell up in literally every single duel you play with these things, so they made their stats absolutely awful to circumvent the massive amounts of attack drainage they'll be doing. All in all, this monster offers some good attack reduction if Venom Swamp is on the field, but the fact that it requires a tribute in an already slow deck makes it worth running at 1 max. Also, for some reason they have a level 4 normal monster with 100 attack and 2000 defense. Ha! Look at this 2007 ass bitch! He ain't even a tuner, ain't that right, Flamewell Guard? Their first boss monster, I know it is kinda out of nowhere, but you didn't see anything yet, is Phenomenon. The king of poisonous snakes. Because a king of friendly snakes wouldn't be nearly as threatening apparently. Anyway, he can't be special summoned by another effect monster's effect, but can be normal summoned and special summoned by other means with no problems. He's unaffected by Venom Swamp, notice that his name isn't actually Venom but Venom, so that clause had to be there, and he gains 500 attack for each reptile type monster in the graveyard. If he is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can banish one other reptile type monster from your graveyard to special summon him back. That's actually pretty decent protection for the time, considering your grave is mostly filled with reptiles at that point, and the card Snake Rain, which is, by the way, just waiting for an archetype of reptile floaters before it gets banned, lets you discard a card to send 4 reptiles from your deck to the graveyard, giving Phenomenon 2000 attack and 4 more revivals. However, you can always just destroy him with card effects, so that's where things get a little weird. Rise of the Snake Deity is a normal trap you can activate when Phenomenon is destroyed by a card effect. Special summon one Venominaga, the deity of poisonous snakes, from your hand or deck. Alright, so most of you should already be aware of this Venominaga, but for newcomers, let me sum it up real quick. Can only be special summoned with Rise of the Snake Deity and her own effect. She gains 500 attack for each reptile type monster in your graveyard, and she cannot be targeted by, and is unaffected by, all card effects except her own. When she's destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can banish a reptile from the graveyard to special summon her, just like Phenomenon. When this card inflicts battle damage to the opponent, place one Hyper Venom counter on it. When this card has 3 Hyper Venom counters on it, you win the duel. Well then, that went from a 0 to 500 real quick, didn't it? And to those who may be wondering, yes, this is the first card ever to be unaffected by all card effects, which is already impressive by itself, but she also cannot be targeted by card effects, constantly revives herself when destroyed by battle, and to top it all off, she has a fucking built-in win condition as if she wasn't fun already. Next to Zhu Xin, who came out 9 years later mind you, this is arguably the most protection of any card in the game. It's just so bizarre that of all possible archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, both villain and protagonist ones, it's Venoms that get a card of this caliber. You would think they would leave something like this for Divine Neos or just generally anyone who has a deck building up to some kind of final climax, but no, they give Venominaga to an archetype that struggles with summoning their first boss monster, let alone getting to the trap card and actually having said boss monster blow up by a card effect. But yeah, Venominaga is absolutely insane, and I would say the card's only weakness, barring Kaijus and the lightning because fuck him, is her meandering attack value, because if you're summoning her, you're probably doing it as turbo as possible, so in that case the graveyard is usually not jam-packed with reptiles, so she gets ran over easily. She was significantly easier to get out with higher attack around the time the archetype was made, but their chances of relevance dissipated really fast in the upcoming formats, mostly due to their lack of additional support. Now I just want to point your attention towards the fact that she's a snake, but she also has snake arms, but those snakes have little snakes in their mouths. Do you think there's a little small snake in that snake too? Strange. Now I jerked the snake titty enough already, so let's head over to their spells and traps. Venom Shot is a normal spell that you can activate if you control a Venom monster, Phenomenon, or Venominaga. Send one reptile type monster from your deck to the graveyard and place 2 Venom counters on one monster the opponent controls. Pretty decent actually. The cost of controlling a Venom monster is no big deal, and while it also sets up the graveyard, if you have Venom Swamp it also offers a somewhat nasty 1000 attack reduction. Mind you, all these counter placing cards actually target, so don't think you'll be reenacting this concept successfully. But as far as things go, Venom Shot is a surprisingly decent support spell congruent with the rest of the archetype, although it would be cooler if it was a quick play. Ambush Fangs is a normal trap that you can activate when a Venom monster you control is attacked. Negate the attack, end the battle phase, and then place 1 Venom counter on the monster that attacked. What the fuck, Venoms, this is actually good, give me something to rip on, damn it! Not only does this help when protecting low attack monsters like Venom Snake and Serpent, but it also weakens the attacking monster and prevents the opponent from trying to attack again, leaving Venom Swamp as well as your monsters to do their thing next turn. Even without Venom Swamp on the field, this is a legit good protection, so other than simply being power creeped, I really don't have any problems with this one. Venom Burn is a normal trap that allows you to target one monster with Venom counters on it, remove all those counters, and burn your opponent for 700 damage for each counter removed. Not exactly the most necessary support, as in you will rarely see pure Venom decks actively running this because removing counters kinda goes against their logic, but you can build a somewhat nasty Venom Burn dedicated deck by filling it up with 0 attack monsters which won't get destroyed by Venom Swamp, protecting them while stacking them up with counters, and then ripping the opponent a new one with this card's effect. It's not exactly consistent, but can be pretty fun on a casual level. And the last Venom card is Snake Deity's Command. That guy is not having a fun time.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Snake.
It's a counter trap that lets you reveal a Venom monster in your hand to negate the activation of an opponent's spell card and destroy it. Again, this is actually good. The cost is practically non-existent, and it being limited to spells only is warranted because this kind of easy negation of anything would be a bit too much for the time. Even in today's format, you'll find plenty of decks heavily stunned by their crucial spell or pendulum scale being negated. Okay, now I'm just mad Venoms have this much legit nice support because it proves something really good could have come from this archetype, but they're just so lacking in content to do anything significant. In this case, it's not the quality that's the problem, it's the quantity, or the lack thereof. Which leads me to the grading scale. Consistency. Other than King of the Fair Limbs, which is not even one of their cards but the generic rank 4, I cannot think of anything this archetype has going for it in this aspect. Power. Even with a reduction from Venom Swamp, the damage values around these parts are very low. Their 2 boss monsters depend on your graveyard being stacked with snakes in order to be a threat in terms of attack power, which is too infrequent to count. Comeback ability. As with any reptile deck, Snake Rain and Soul Charge is a fun little combo that can get you back on your feet, but other than that, there's really not much going on here other than the boss monsters reviving themselves with less and less attack each time. Protection. For the first time on Legacy of the Worthless, I have to give an archetype a medium grade in protection, mainly because of the existence of Venominaga, no matter how hard she may be to summon, as well as the few traps that let Venoms control the game state in a surprisingly efficient way. And versatility, well, the only argument here is they're better matched up against old decks than they are against new ones. Then again, they also struggle with those due to how slow they are, so... Yeah. So, as I already said, Venoms have a basic outline on how to work, so what they need in order to do anything relevant are cards which work toward their focus of attack reduction and control. First of all, a new field spell with an updated effect for the modern game that would maybe banish a monster when it hits 0 attack instead of destroying it, and would maybe have recovery options similar to Cosmo Town. It would make sense that this place would be swarming with snakes. After that, more relevant monsters with effects other than just once per turn bite a monster, although speaking of which, it would be nice if they could do this on either player's turn. New snakes would maybe give different kinds of debuffs to monsters they target, such as negating their effects or permanently changing their battle position. There is way more imagination you could put into the counters without having the swamp do anything. Also floating effects, but don't make them too useful or Snake Rain spikes 6000% in price. And lastly, the spell and trap support just needs to keep going the way it is right now. The idea is perfectly clear, setting up your plays while also working with the rest of the archetype by distributing Venom counters and protecting your monsters. Check out the ways Cloudians distribute their counters, but amp it up to 11. Venoms definitely show potential, and I think they were right in front of the door of relevance before they suddenly got locked by the death of the anime character who used them. A shame really, because there are little to no competitive decks that successfully employ counters in their strategy. But come on, if Konami could make Geminis playable and Unions tier 1, I'm pretty damn sure they have something in store for counters as well, and I would love to see a continuation of Venoms. And don't give me that Predator plan shit, because judging by their first 3 cards so far, nobody's gonna fucking play them. Oh, and speaking of which, yes, I know Star Venom Fusion Dragon is a thing, but that's a part of the Venom archetype as much as Castell is a part of the Sky Blaster archetype. So now that we arrested the bandits and exterminated the snakes, it's time to launch into the orbit and rebel against the Empire. B.E.S. is an archetype of spaceships based on bosses from Konami's Gradius games, which actually had a lot of stuff adapted into Yu-Gi-Oh!, although not exactly as an archetype. No idea why B.E.S. had to be one, but here we are. They were used by this person in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX in a shitty filler episode, and of course, B.E.S. stands for Biscuit Enlargement Surgery. The first B.E.S. monster, funnily enough, wasn't originally a part of the archetype, so we can probably conclude it's being piloted by Don Zalug. Big Core is a level 6 dark machine with 2300 attack and 1100 defense, and its effect is shared by almost every B.E.S. monster. When it's normal summoned, place 3 counters on it. This card cannot be destroyed by battle. If it battles a monster, remove a counter from it at the end of the damage step. If it battles without a counter, destroy it at the end of the damage step. Now, if this card made any sense whatsoever, the counters would only get removed when the card would be destroyed, which in turn would make for a pretty decent single tribute monster back in the day. But no, instead, Big Core is not only unprotected from any removal other than battle, but it can die if it destroys too many monsters. Really, the only benefit of this thing is stalling, and even so, there are way better tribute monsters you could be using for that purpose. The next one is Busty Estonian Shopkeeper Crystal Core. It's a water machine with 2100 attack and 1000 defense, and it has the exact same effect as Big Core, except that it doesn't even need to battle a monster to lose counters, it loses them even upon direct attacking! Wonderful! Also, once per turn you can target one monster the opponent controls and change it from face-up attack to defense position. That's a tiny little bit more utility than the previous card at the cost of 200 attack points, and losing counters even harder. Does a spell speed 1 battle position change really warrant running it even in a BES deck? No, it doesn't. Barbarian Ectoplasm Shitflinger Tetran is a wind machine with 1800 attack and 2300 defense, same counter effect as Crystal Core, and once per turn, you can remove a counter from it to destroy one spell or trap card on the field. Any possible usage this card might have had is cancelled out by the fact that it will most likely get to use its back row removal effect only once, because its attack value makes it super easy to run over, and nobody would really have problems attacking it while it's in defense position. Also, this is their best monster, so go figure. Next up we have Bibliographical Embalmer Swagman Big Core Mark II. You can see it's Big Core from the future where we got shit like colors and explosions and phallics. It's a fire machine with 2400 attack and 1100 defense, and this one is a little different than the others. If you control no monsters, you can normal summon it without tributing, but it doesn't get counters. No, it gets 3 counters when it's special summoned, and they work the exact same way as the last 2 monsters. And it has no additional effects. Keep in mind that if you normal summon it, it gets immediately destroyed after its first battle. You may be asking why it's so horrible and what's with the out of play special summoning condition. Well, you'll get your answers in a minute, but before that we have their final monster, Bullshit Excavation Site Covered Core. It's a level 7 earth machine with 2500 attack and 800 defense, and when it's normal summoned, it gets 2 counters. However, the condition for losing them is not just attacking or getting attacked, but at the end of the damage step you toss a coin, and if you're wrong, remove a counter. Remember how in Gurren Lagann they had this thing called probability alteration missiles? I hope for the love of this fucking spaceship that those things around him are precisely that, and that he's about to go call all the coins as right as rain. As for everyone else, fuck this thing. And now for their one single solitary support card, because otherwise they wouldn't even be an archetype, we have Boss Rush. The first sentence of its effect beautifully summarizes the entire collective suffering of humanity, boiled down to a single concept in a children's card game. You cannot normal summon or set. Beautiful. During the end phase of the turn that a B.E.S monster or a big core is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one B.E.S monster or one big core from your deck. See all those monsters on the card? You don't want to summon any of them because they get none of their counters when special summoned, so the process practically turns them from metal to paper. No, instead the only monster you should ever bother summoning with this is Big Core Mark II. If the opponent literally has zero options for removal other than battle, the repeated summoning of this monster might leave them in a tight spot. However, if your card's condition for being considered useful is the opponent being a literal toddler, you might need to rethink your choice of deck. Boss Rush frankly fascinates me due to how much misunderstanding of an archetype concept can possibly be shoved into a single quote-unquote support card. Now for this part, listen, there's only 6 cards of which like 5 have almost the exact same effect, so let me get this over with quickly. No, 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 plenty but in a completely irrelevant place, and no. So, as what could have been done to make them playable? Well, actually I have some stuff to say here. First of all, their protection shouldn't be exclusive to battle but also card effects. Barely anyone frequently attacks into monsters with more than 2100 attack, and relying on much of the monarchs makes the whole thing a bit too inconsistent. Next up, just make Boss Rush a field spell. Considering how much they rely on it, making it as searchable as possible is a priority. Also, why the fuck would you prevent the player from normal summoning? Get rid of that shit. And have it place counters on the monsters it summons that don't get them when they're special summoned. Then, they need more lower level monsters that will either act as a tribute engine, searchers, or both. You cannot base your entire archetype on a single normal summon of a tribute monster that will be followed by a continuous spell. And also give them more support for fuck's sake, maybe something that restores counters or removes counters to pop stuff on the field. Support for this is just ridiculously easy to make, but I don't really blame Konami for not trying much on this one. After all, their video game based cards are usually random irrelevant pack filler, and Boss Rush was just made as a silly reference to the titular Boss Rush levels in Gradius games. Wouldn't it be cool though? Imagine an archetype of cool looking pilots, their awesome spaceships with lots of protection that get replaced by more spaceships when they're destroyed, their field spell that massively boosts their consistency, maybe even a little robot that can surge them all out. But I guess something like that would never happen after all, it does sound a bit too broken. Ah, silly me and my dreams. Ladies and gentlemen, railbacks and railcars, thank you for watching this episode of Frank the Yu-Gi-Oh's Legacy of the Worthless. If you liked it, do remember to subscribe, and as usual, I will see you next time.